Okay. First talk today is from our convener. You already know him, but so he doesn't require any introduction. So he is Professor Adway Mitra from IIT Kharagpur. He did his BTech CS from Jadavpur University and MS and PhD, ME and PhD from ISC Bangalore in computer science. And currently he is a professor in the Center of AI at IIT Kharagpur. I don't know, already you know about him. And he has done a lot of work in developing the AI model for the weather forecasting and model data bias corrections and downscaling, a lot of things he has done. And today I think he's going to summarize a lot of machine learning algorithms used in the monsoon. That's what you are going to do. So I think it's already time 9:30, so we will start the talk. Please.
Okay, good morning and welcome back everyone after the break. So as Bipin, so thanks a lot to Bipin for introduction. And now, as he said, my talk is mainly about machine learning for monsoon. But just before I start my slides, let's just just make sure that we have not forgotten what we learned last week, and let's try to just build a mind map of Earth system models. Let's see the so as I briefly discussed in previous week. So whenever we are learning something about a new concept like Earth system models, a few broad things we need to remember: the whats, the whys, the hows, and the whats, right? So what we will do is just try to build a something like a mind map of ESMs, and also try to place the different talks we had last week to see like which are the aspects that we have covered and which are the aspects that we hope to cover this week. So this week is expected to be more intense on the machine learning part. So just because the talks are a bit scattered due to the convenience of the speakers and so on. So some of you may tend to get a bit confused with so many things coming in from different directions. So at times it might be useful to just make sure that everything is order. So first of all, let's ask the questions, what, right? So related to what ESMs are, related to the basic philosophy behind the Earth system models. We had some of the speakers who talked about like what the Earth system model is, right? So who told us, or which talks were about the whats of ESM? What do you say? This is let's treat it as an audience, like as an interactive session. So who are from, like, what did you learn about what are ESMs? Right? Anyone saying something? So Professor Raghu Muttugudde, right? He tried to develop a schematic diagram for the Earth system models where he showed the ecological. I'm sorry. Let's say the different aspects: the anthroposphere, the biosphere, and of course the hydrology and meteorology, atmosphere, and so on. So like he tried to develop this schematic diagram about what the Earth system models are. So Raghu told us about the basic design philosophy of Earth system models. A bit was mentioned by the very first talk by Gokhan also. So now, why? So why do we need Earth system models? So why do we need Earth system models? Come on, be interactive. Why do we need Earth system models? Basically for like climate change and understanding climate change, right? Any other answer? Why we need Earth system models? Right. Right. So who are the speakers or which talks we heard last week related to the whys of Earth system model? Okay. And anyone, and what else? So yeah, so that I will place a bit in the so what's, that is how we can utilize the outcomes of earth system models. But why? Another talk which I will place in the whys is the talk by Professor Tejal Kanitkar, who mentioned about the integrated assessment model. So so like there were some talks related to understanding of climate change.
You're talking about ESM. I would say that they should also understand what is the difference in GCM and ESM.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
simple weather forecasting and I mean, you should understand what is the difference between only the general circulation model and the Earth system model. Do you have any idea, anybody? Maybe you can go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, so what is general circulation model about, right? Please be interactive. Like this part, first 15 minutes is basically for interaction. So so like art system,
Maybe do we need the two model, general circulation model and Earth system model?
or what are the extra things which we have in the earth system models? That is there in GCMs also, right?
With the circulation model, they account for only the atmosphere and ocean interaction. Yeah. And in our system models, there are another subsystems which professor said, like the anthroposphere.
Yeah, land surface and
The biosphere, also the biosphere and the anthroposphere, which Professor Raghu mentioned.
Note down everybody the difference.
And yes. So like when we are talking about GCMs, we are mostly talking about the atmospheric circulation and so on. But an earth system model has many more spheres, right? It also like talks about the coupling between the land, ocean, and as well as the atmospheric processes, and not like this we can say as the these are all related to the natural sphere. But apart from that, we also have the biosphere, which has the vegetation and the living organisms and so on. So Gokhan, like in his talk, he mentioned about fish, right? About incorporating some fish model. And then which we did not talk about much, was about the anthroposphere, that is the human activities. So Professor Tejal Kanitkar's talk actually tried to bring in some human aspects, like the energy utilization and these and and economics. So they, like, if all these things are brought together, then it becomes an integrated assessment model. So this when we are having an integrated assessment model, that really I mean, when we are having art system model, it helps us to understand climate change, but the human component of it is typically just considered as a forcing. That is something like, but it is not explicitly modeled. So if that is also explicitly modeled, then we can say it becomes really an integrated assessment model. So you might remember the feedback diagram which Professor Tejal had written. So you have the ESMs. The ESMs provide some simulations. Those simulations enter the models about the energy economics models, and then those energy economics models, they give some output that is again feedback into the earth system model. So the whole thing together, we can say as a grand model, right? So in like say it's in ICTS. So like in physics, there are some theories about building building a grand model with the different force types of forces and so on. So like if we can bring all these things together, then we can have a grand earth system models. So anyway, so why like we can say is Tejal, even Swapna Panikal in her talk, who actually described the development of the IITM Earth system models. She also showed how these climate change analysis can be done using it and so on. Maybe some others also. most of the talks were related to the hows, so that I am coming a little later, but let's go to the so what. So when I say so what, I mean that, okay, you have this idea of Earth system models and you can develop it, and well, like you know why you want to do it. Okay, but so you run it, you develop it, you run simulations for then up to like 2100, and so many scenarios of study. But so what? Finally, what are you going to do about it, right? Is it just an academic exercise, or can it result in something very concrete? So some examples of that we heard from some of the talks. So you mentioned Professor Shubhimal Ghosh's talk about like making the flood predictions using the hyperlocal forecasts and so on. So one of the so what talks was by Professor Shubhimal Ghosh, and so he told us about flood forecasting, also about for the also for farmers, how farm level forecasts can help them optimize their cropping schedule and so on. Then we also have some talks by, say, Nirav. So he talked about air quality monitoring, right? So like he may not have made an explicit connection to our system models, but like you will remember that he talked about these models about like how the different pollutants are transported, right? So that like that, so that is obviously like we can say. So he talked about the like the different versions of the WRF model, the WRF. So although that is by itself, it cannot be called an ESM, but like we can relate his talk to the in that way to Earth system models, that how these the concentration of pollutants, etc., they are dependent on climatic conditions. That can see like so we can think, if we have an Earth system model with then we can try to like plug in one module related to air quality to it. So we have Nirav talking about air quality. Then we had Ashwin Sheshadri. He talked about these renewable energy sources and how climate variability influences our ability to generate renewable energy. Now, finally, let's focus on the how, because that is the most crucial component which most of the speakers have talked about. So like if we try to like imagine the main components of the Earth system models. So we have the as we just discussed, there are so many different layers. We have the like for each of the layers we have a set of governing equations. We have some parameterization schemes, and then like there are ways of coupling the different the different components together. And so what are the different components? So we have the atmospheric component. Then we had the land component, the ocean component. We have the biosphere. We have the human component, and so on. So and then when we are having all these things, so like for each of the components we need to have some governing equations. We need to have parameterization schemes. We need to have ways of coupling between the different components and so on. So many of the talks actually told us, some of the talks told us the specifics of each of these components, right? So for example, any example? What did Gokhant tell us about? He told us about the ocean component, and like he actually showed in detail the governing equations of the ocean also. And related to the atmosphere, we have the like Vishal Dikshit told us about the atmospheric circulation, about the moist convective processes, and so on. And like then we had the talk by Rama where she talked about climate microphysics. Sorry, about the cloud microphysics. So that is like as some of the speakers also highlighted that the processes in all these spheres they like there is a wide variation in scale. So there are some processes which are at the scale of maybe less than even 1 meter, and then there are also scales which I mean processes at scales of a few hundred kilometers as well, right? So Rama's talk about cloud microphysics, about how the water droplets are formed, how they coalesce together to form these raindrops, and what causes the rains and so on. So that again is we can say is a micro scale process, but we can put it as part of the atmosphere. So this is Rama's talk was at one scale, then Vishal Dikshit's talk was at another scale, and then maybe we'll have some more talks related to the dynamics of Indian monsoon. So that will be at another scale, and so on and so forth. We did not have any talk about land processes so far. Today, I think we will have a talk about the biogeochemistry, maybe the next to next talks. So now when we have these different components, then as I said, there are many computational aspects about how to simulate the dynamics of these components, how to stitch them together. So there are different parameterization schemes. So Vishal Vasan told us about the different about the the mathematical background of parameter estimation in general. So when it comes to parameterization, we had the talk by Vishal Vasan. And then finally, most importantly, because what is the aim of this workshop is how AI and ML can help in all these things. So although this week is dedicated to that, but even in the last week, we had some examples of that. So there are many ways in which the AI and ML can help in Earth system models, which I will shortly summarize in a slide. But still, let's see what we have already seen so far. We have Professor B.N. Goswami, who talked a lot about these AI-based weather forecast models. So he actually told us about the limitations of standard weather, the operational weather forecasting models, which are mostly based on the governing equations. So he told us about the error growth problem and and the limitations of parameterization and so on. And he showed that how AI might help us overcome these problems. So what he essentially suggested is to use the AI-based models as some sort of an emulator. So I will more on emulators in a bit, but the broad idea being that instead of doing so many a detailed model with so many governing equations, how about if we can bypass them and let AI bridge that gap? More on that later. So we had, so let's say AI enhanced ESMs. So we had B.N. Goswami sir telling us about this. And then we had some very informative talks by Professor Tom Buechler the other day. So he told us about some specific machine learning tools which can help us, like the PIMS, for example, the physics guided machine learnings. Etc. And one more, and Vishal Dikshit also, once he first talked about the moist convective processes. He described the governing equations and all that, and then he also told us how we can try to use. He showed several research papers in which how machine learning can work as an emulation of all this. So that's one more talk. Okay, so like in the question, one more thing. Sorry, in the why question, one more forgot to mention. There's the talk by Professor Orpita Mondal. So like her talk was mostly related to attribution, right? So attribution means what? Attribution means a particular event has happened and we try to attribute it to some particular factor like climate change. Now, for that attribution, for such attribution, what we need is counterfactual, because we need to ask, like, would this event have happened if there was no climate change? Now, counterfactual is something we don't observe. So then how do we get it? Obviously from Earth system models. So for such attribution also, we do need Earth system models. So that's also a question of why. At least that's the way I would look upon it. Okay, so hopefully this helps you to recall all the talks and try to situate the different talks, the different pieces of information which you have received in some kind of framework. So now let's now proceed with my talk. You can bring down this slide, this thing, please. Hello?
Please bring down the another screen also.
Is there anyone? It's supposed to be here. Anyways. So till then, let's just continue with one screen. I hope somebody comes soon. So anyways, so what are some of the shortcomings of Earth system models which we have seen so far? So one is huge computational resources. So like you would have seen there, or many of the speakers might have told that about the the supercomputers, etc., which are needed to run these Earth system models. So that, which basically means that someone like me who does not necessarily have access to so much computational resources, for them, like if I want to do a simple climate change scenario analysis in a very specific context. Let's say I just want to know about how Bangalore's weather will look like in different scenarios. So I don't have to run like a huge model with supercomputers to answer this question. I should be able to run it on my own laptop. So the huge computational resources that are required to learn these Earth system models, that is one problem. Then this question of accumulating errors, this is or the error growth problem, that is something which Professor B.N. Goswami has already told us about. Apart from that, there are like regional biases. So like we all know that Earth system, there are certain processes which are well simulated by the Earth system models. Means like what is simulated by the models and what is actually observed in the, or has been observed in the past, if you compare their statistics, like you will see them more or less aligning. But then there are some other processes which are not so well simulated by the Earth system models. So like I did this study on Indian monsoon rainfall. So like when it comes to Indian monsoon rainfall, we know that there are a lot of spatiotemporal variability. So like how well are those spatiotemporal variabilities which are actually observed in Indian monsoon, how well are they observed in Earth system models? So I did this study using something known as spatial patterns, which I will briefly tell you. So like what these spatial patterns are is means like a typical day of a monsoon season, how the rainfall is like distributed spatially across the Indian landmass. So we did a study here in ICTS several years back, and we identified some 8 or 10 canonical patterns right? So like, which means like there are like the rainfall map of during any day of an Indian monsoon, we found that typically is one of 10 different varieties. Depends on how and where how much rainfall is happening and where that rainfall is located. So the way, if I try to find such patterns from the observed data and from the simulated data, by simulations by Earth system models, we see a lot of mismatch. I will show you one example of such a pattern just because I mentioned it. So this is what like if you consider India Meteorological Department's website, like you will often see these maps like this. So like here it shows the actual rainfall that has happened in different parts of the country in a typical monsoon season. Like say this is for 2024, and this is the anomaly map. That is, if you subtract the what is actually observed minus the mean over each of these locations for let's say the past 50 years or so, you will see that there are some reds suggesting there was deficient, less rainfall than usual, and then there is blue, means that there is more rainfall than usual. So like this is of course the seasonal map, but what about the maps of a particular day? This. So we made some typical identified some typical patterns like this, which we got obtained from the observational data, and then we tried to match those patterns with similar patterns found from the Earth system models, and we found that they are not matching very well. So that is I will just show one of those patterns. I'm just skipping several slides. I will come back again. So these are some of the patterns which we observed. So like you can say that this does not necessarily mean, so like here what we see is a binary way of observing the monsoon through a binary lens. So blue means, let's say, this is where rainfall is happening, and green means this is where there is no rainfall. This does not necessarily mean that there is no rainfall, but there is no organized system of rainfall in these regions. While this, like say, this roughly corresponds to the Indo-Gangetic plain. So this is what we observed is there are certain days of the monsoon season, typical monsoon season, where we see most of these locations having rainfall, or most of these locations having rainfall. This is another kind of pattern, the central India pattern. Here we see that most of the rainfall is happening in these regions. So this is like this pattern, so there is also this concept of MISO, the monsoon intra-seasonal oscillations. So that is another work that was done by in IITM Pune. So that was also related to some these special patterns. So what we saw is from the Earth system models, we do not necessarily see the patterns which we get from the Earth system models don't match well with this. So that is like another possible failure of the Earth system models. So then how does machine learning help for Earth system models? So like one of the approaches which is possible is, of course, the basic idea is we can draw new insights from the data. I mean, whatever we have, the governing equations, most of them are physics-based governing equations. But can we gain new information with the help of data? So earlier we had a talk by Tom Buechler about these equation discovery, right? So that is some way in which we can draw some new insights from data. We can form new or we can hope to refine the governing equations and so on. Then another is when we have these complex relations between the different variables, we can often try to represent these kinds of complex relations with the help of neural networks, because as you know that a neural network is nothing but a way of representing arbitrarily complicated mathematical functions. So we have large number of variables among which we are trying to establish some kind of a relation. It's often difficult to write down the relation, express the relations with by writing down a large number of equations. But if we can build a neural network which with a very large number of layers, I mean, of course, like appropriate layers, then it's possible to express those kinds of complex relationships. In fact, the AI-based weather forecast models, which you have already heard of, like the GraphCast, ForecastNet, and so on. So this is what they essentially do. They have the weather states of the previous time point, let's say time t, and they want to predict the weather states at next time t plus 1. So the relation between, let's say, the weather states we denote by a variable x. And so we have xt and we have xt plus 1. So the mapping from xt to xt plus 1, they represent that mapping through through some neural network, so which defines some very complex relation between them. Then apart from that, we can have these we can assimilate new data and calibrate the simulations with the observations, and we can, of course, the Earth system models, as we know, they will we cannot have run them at very high resolution temporal, high spatial and temporal resolutions because of computational requirements. So what often happens is we run the Earth system models at a reasonable resolution, and if you want something at higher resolutions, let's say down to a kilometer scale or something like that, then we do what is known as downscaling. So now this week you will hear 2 or 3 talks by downscaling. So this downscaling is there are two broad ways of doing downscaling. One is dynamical downscaling, another is statistical downscaling. Statistical downscaling means you try to establish a relation between the observations at very high resolution and let's say at a lower resolution. So earlier that statistical downscaling used to be done by, let's say, some simple probability distributions or maybe linear regression, this kind of thing. It was not considered very successful at that time. But now that neural networks can express very complex functions, we now have achieved more accuracy in statistical downscaling, because we are now able to represent a complex relation between the observations at a high resolution and the same observations at a not so high resolution also. So that is, apart from that, I talked about the biases and errors in the Earth system model simulations. So then these machine learning models, they help us to make bias correction. That is, you have the bias simulations by the Earth system models, you feed it to a machine learning model, and what you get is a bias corrected solution. Of course, there are problems with this approach, which Professor Shubimal has already talked about. So this is I have already given a primer about what supervised learning, machine learning is about. So I'm not going into the details of all these things. So, but whenever you are trying to design a machine learning problem, and in the context of Earth system models, there are certain design choices which you must make. I mean, there are so many tools available of machine learning. So we cannot really throw in all the tools. We have to understand the context and choose the tools accordingly. So first of all, these are some questions which we must answer to ourselves before we start. So how many predictor variables are there? What is it that we are trying to predict, and what are the predictor variables? How many of them are there? Do I want a single forecast, or do I want to make a time series of forecasts? Similarly, the variables, the predictor variables which we have, is it just single observations? I mean, observations at a particular time point, or is it like a time series of observations? And then is it are we going to have them as a vector or as a spatial map? For example, what you are seeing here is this is by ForecastNet. So we are basically making forecasts of certain weather variables over an entire region. In this case, the North American region. So you can see the forecasts are made at every location. So what really we should see is we have the input is the observations over this geographical region. So we can say the input is a map and the output is also going to be a map. So this is a particular setting of the problem. But on the other hand, if the problem is something like just predicting the seasonal rainfall, in that case, the target variable, the predictor variable, is just one number. You are going to just predict one number. So in that case, you don't in that case, the the machine learning architecture which will choose in that case will be quite different from the architecture which you will be choosing in this case. Then and it's talking about architectures. So I am talking mostly about neural networks. That does not mean that neural network is the only kind of machine learning model, but since they are the most common and most effective approach nowadays, mostly because they can represent very complicated functions. So like I am showing this picture of neural network. So like we have to talk about the architecture of the neural network. Like these issues I have already talked about. What kind, I mean, how many layers to have, and what kind of, like whether you will have what kind of operations you want to do at the different layers, and so on and so forth. And especially if the data is sequential in nature, then we have to choose with, like there are different neural network models for sequential data also. So we had recurrent neural networks, we have long short-term memories. Nowadays we have attention-based models also. And then if the data is spatio-temporal in nature, then we have to have like some neural network which can take both the spatial nature as well as the temporal nature into account. So there is this convolutional LSTM. So which the convolution part is to represent the spatial aspects of the data, and the LSTM part is to represent the temporal aspect of the data. And then we have these learning algorithms. So as I said, like whenever we are building some kind of any kind of model, we typically have a large number of parameters associated with them. Now how do we estimate the values of the different parameters? Now we have observations, and we have we have the governing equations, etc. of the model, so which contains the parameters. So we have to tune the parameters so that what the model simulates matches what is actually observed. So we have the like learning algorithms for that purpose. So like these learning algorithms, these are essentially optimization algorithms. So we have some loss functions where we are trying to like we have a target variable which we are for which we have some expected value, expected outcome, and we are trying to match it to what is actually simulated by the model. So these two things are compared by the loss functions, and the loss function is something which we want to minimize, so that to make sure that the predicted and the expected values, they are as close to each other as possible. And so we basically we estimate the parameters in such a way that this loss function is minimized. So and then when we are using machine learning on this kind of a problem, which also involves lots of our knowledge, it also involves various processes related to physics, chemistry, etc. from the sciences. So that is, if we are trying to build this traditional art system model, of course we know all these governing equations. Now when we are building a machine learning based solutions, then we do not consider these governing equations, but then it may so happen that the predictions which we make are they may violate some laws of the physics. So we had some discussions why that is necessary during Tom Buechler's talk. So he showed us that how we can make sure that the predictions which our machine learning models make are consistent with various laws of physics. Now coming to the applications in the Indian monsoon. So these are so I am from computer science background, and I am not from the meteorology background, but as a computer scientist, these are I can try to, from my perspective, these are some of the main tasks related to Indian monsoon which we can see. One is the forecasting tasks, that is we can try to make forecasts at different scales. We can make at seasonal scales, that is like a few months ahead we can try to say whether this year's rainfall is going to be above normal, below normal, etc. We can make it at a sub-seasonal scale, and even these daily forecasts at a few hourly forecasts, which is that is nowcasting as it is called. That's one class of problems. And then this can be done at different spatial scales. We can do it at an all India scale. We can do it for some specific regions, like as they say homogeneous regions in IM terminology, or we can make a full gridded forecast. And then we can even make point-based, like station-based forecasts. Then we and that is one family of tasks. Another family of tasks is like I already mentioned. So we have some simulations by the different art system models, but then they have biases, they have limitations, like they're at a particular spatial scales or temporal scales. Now I want them at a higher resolution. So then I can try to do this kind of downscaling or spatial or downscaling or temporal downscaling, or I can try to remove the biases, that is through bias correction. That is another set of things. And finally, there is simulations, or that is, or as we will talk about it, emulation, where like our aim is basically to generate some time series of like spatial maps and so on. So more on this later. So when it comes to the forecasting of monsoons, so by the way, forecasting of monsoon is a task that people have tried to do for well in the 1800s itself. And for a long time, the IMD had different kinds of forecasting models. They started with some 8-parameter forecasting models, then 16-parameter models, and so on. Then they gradually, I mean, so those were some of the statistical techniques. Then like we moved to dynamical techniques. So maybe we will have some more talks by that from Dr. Rajiv Chattopadhyay, who is here. But in recent times, we have this some AI-based forecasting of monsoons. So this work, which is done by at least, I can say at least 3 of the authors of this paper are already sitting here: Bipin, Rajiv, and Ravi. So like this is like one of the early works in which that is there are different sources of data. We have ground observations and we have remote sensing, that is satellite-based data, and then both of them are utilized and integrated, we can say, in a deep learning framework to make so like you can say conv-LSTM is the deep learning technique which has been used here, which I already mentioned. So like here they are like all this is for short range forecasting of Indian summer monsoon rainfall. Then like similar, like this on the other hand, is more like long term forecasting, that is with up to 2 years in advance. So this is here this work by Professor B.N. Goswami and his colleagues. So here the aim is to like to use the like worldwide predictors. So Professor Goswami mentioned something called as the 20-degree isotherm, or the D20. So based on that, based on the worldwide D20, he is trying to make these forecasts of the Indian monsoon at like nearly 2 years in advance. Then this work is at forecasting more specific aspects of the Indian monsoon at these these active spells and break spells. So I don't know, maybe Professor Ravi is here, so he may talk more about this. So now, this is one kind of work. This is related to forecasting. But what forms the basis of forecasting? That is, how do we know which variables can be used for forecasting? So obvious, the answer has to be those variables which have some kind of causal relationship with the Indian monsoon. Now, how do we know which variables are have some causal relationships with Indian monsoon? So variables, again, we can define certain like individual variables like sea surface temperature or D20 isotherm or wind speed, etc., which can be measured all over the globe. Or we can also consider like these different modes of various global climate variability, like the ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, which I'm sure all of you have heard of. Apart from this, we have various other modes like the IOD, the AMO, NAO, etc. So which are known to be somewhat related to the Indian monsoon. So but now how do we like we know that they have the physics of the atmosphere tells us that there has to be some relation between these modes and the processes which bring about the Indian monsoon. But how do we quantify their relationships? So that for that we like in some study we try to do what is known as explainability analysis. So let's say we build a machine learning model using these as the predictor variables, and like Indian monsoon as the predictant. And then we try to let's say we train the model with a lot of data, and let's say we achieve high predictive accuracy also. Then we stop and ask, so what is the contribution of each of these predictors? So there is this domain of explainable AI, which has developed over the past let's say almost a decade or so, where we ask specific, let's say, okay, your ML model is doing so great, but then why did it do so great? So which parts of the input were really utilized in making the prediction, right? So there are various ways of doing this explainability analysis. So one of the things which we tried is using these the shapely value based analysis, where the idea is you build a model and then you apply this framework called shapely values to quantify the role of each of the predictor variables for every single prediction that you make. So like here what we try to do is, so let us say that there are certain years in which we are trying we are predicting the total amount of rainfall. So we know that there are some ISMR has a degree of annual variability, interannual variability. There are some years in which the rainfall is high, so they can be called as excess rainfall years. There are some years when it is low, we call those as deficient rainfall years, and so on. So now it is generally known to people that years when there is an El Nino, they are often associated with deficient rainfall in India, and the years of La Nina are associated with excess rainfall in India. But then let's say there is a particular year in which excess rainfall took place. So how much of it can really be attributed to El Nino, or could it, to La Nina, or how much of it could be attributed to maybe other factors? So for this kind of analysis, this SHAP approach becomes very useful. And what you are seeing here, so like here it is 1877, 2002, 1918. These are some years of very deficient rainfall. So the total rainfall anomaly was very negative. Now, how can we attribute that negative anomaly to the different modes? So here it seems that in many of these cases, it can be attributed to this small n, which indicates the El Nino, but not necessarily, because there are also some years in which it can be attributed to IOD, the Indian Ocean dipoles, or to the this AMO. So the similar things can happen for excess rainfall years also. And then there are some interesting years like this where so here we can see that most of these drivers are kind of aligning themselves. We can say they are conspiring among themselves to bring down the rainfall over India. But there are also some years like this where we can see that one driver is pushing the monsoon in one direction, trying to let's say encourage it, and some other drivers are trying to discourage it. And so maybe finally we did not have, it was neither deficient nor excess. So such things can happen. And then we can put this in the framework of causality also. So causality is a very important question which arises in many domains of science. You have two variables, and you want and you know that there is some relation between them, but you want to frame the question, is the relation like a cause-effect relation? That is, can I say that if I change one of these variables in a particular way but don't do anything else to the system, then does the other variable automatically change in some other way? So if that happens, then we can say that they are causally related. But how to check for that? So the one way of doing it is actually by performing some control experiments in which we divide, let's say when we are doing something like vaccine testing. So let's say that someone has come up with a vaccine for something like, say, COVID-19. And then we have to validate that this is actually what is causing the COVID-19 to, this vaccine can cure COVID-19. Then you can design this control experiment that you divide the population into two parts. You give the vaccine to one part and don't give it to another part. And you show that, and you make sure that the two sets of population are otherwise indistinguishable. There is no other difference between them except for the fact that one group got the vaccine, the other did not get the vaccine. And then you show that the population which got the vaccine, they are recovering way better than the part that did not get the vaccine. So that's a controlled experiment. So that is the best way of answering questions of causality. But of course, in a climatic setting, we don't have the luxury of doing control experiments, right? Because you cannot really force the climate to behave in a particular way and see if something else is happening or not. That's not possible. So like we cannot do the control experiments. So what we can do is just from the data which we have, the past observations, we can try to identify some kind of causal relations. So there are approaches known as the Granger causality, where we say that they have two variables are causally related if we can forecast one for the other. Then there are these the PC-MCI type of algorithms which are basically based on conditional independence. Then there is some things known as structural causal models and so on. So we did a study on this using some of these approaches, and we actually tried to form what is known as a causal network indicating connecting these different variables and with the Indian monsoon, so that we can identify which variables are related to the Indian monsoon and not. So apart from that, there are, I also mentioned, these downscaling of rainfall forecast. I'll take 5 more minutes maybe, and then we can have Q&A session. That fine? Yeah. So we can have this, we can have downscaling of rainfall estimates. So we can do it this we already mentioned. So we have low resolution estimates of rainfall, and we want to map them to high resolution estimates. So we treat this as we map it to the problem of image super resolution. So image super resolution is a family of problems in computer vision where you have a low resolution image and we map it to a high resolution image with the help of a neural network. So the same thing which we are doing here now, and so based on this, lot of several groups have come up with different neural network based architectures, and they can compete among each other. So it can be shown that these approaches based on neural networks are perform way better than standard approaches of downscaling, like say this interpolation and so on. Though that is now we can try to improve this kind of downscaling even further by bringing in some auxiliary variables which are known to impact these particular variables, and then maybe instead of if we can make a time series of if we have a time series of observations, then maybe I recently reviewed one paper for scientific reports where they are essentially argue that instead of trying to make these downscaling say independently at different time scales, if we have a time series of observations at low resolution and we try to map it to a time series of observations at high resolutions, that can be done using a neural network framework, and that way we get higher accuracy also. So that's about downscaling. And then I will skip several slides, and then we'll talk to this question of emulation. So what is an emulation? So emulation is essentially related to development of surrogate models for these for a complex model, in this case art system models. So as we argued earlier, art system models are for large scale simulations, but let's say I want to focus on only one or two variables. So I don't want the full art system model. We only want a surrogate model that is only which focuses on only one or two variables, and the other variables on the other external conditions can which are known as the forcings, they can somehow be incorporated into a surrogate model as conditions, because many of these machine learning models, they have some input conditions, so we can try to put them in. So this schematic diagram, this explains it in a very nice way. So we have the climate models or the earth system models which make the simulations, so we have the input variables which can be the forcing agents which I just mentioned, like the greenhouse gases. So they are input to the earth system models, which is based on a set of governing equations, usually PDEs, and by solving them we can get outputs, that is which are related to the time series of or spatial maps of temperature, precipitation, and various other variables over a period of time. But the emulation means you are bypassing this step. You are not really solving all these PDEs, but you are instead having a machine learning model which bypasses it and directly maps these forcing agents to these variables which you are trying to predict. So how is this done? So obviously you have, like this, since this is an ML model, you will have to train it with a large number, with a large volume of data, and you have to calibrate it to these observations. So this is what is done in case of a climate model emulator, where you try to bypass all the governing equations of the Earth system models and instead try to build a ML model which will give similar outputs in response to similar these inputs. This is the age of generative AI models. So we have a huge family of generative models like GANs, VAEs, flow-based models, diffusion models, etc. So they are usually they are used to create a new type of images, new text, and so on, as you are all use ChatGPT, the stable diffusion, and things like that. So the same in the same way, we instead of creating images or text, we can create these estimates of these geophysical variables also, which are simulated by the Earth system models. So these, like in a recent work which Professor B.N. Goswami also talked about, we developed something known as the CV GAN. So this is climate variability GAN. So here our aim was to build an emulator for the global SST variability. That is we estimate the monthly the global monthly SST with the help of this kind of map. So there are two components. One is the slow moving component, and the other is the month-to-month variability. By slow moving component, I mean the climatology. So we separated it into two parts. So like one part it is based on a GAN based architecture, and another is based on like a simple CNN based architecture. And these two models, they work with the help in a feedback like mechanism. And the interesting thing about this work is that this model which we developed, this was trained by with GCA by ESM outputs from the different CMIP6 families, so they learned to emulate these CMIP6 models very well. But then the CMIP6 models also have some inherent biases themselves. Now who will correct the biases? So we use the framework of transfer learning by bringing in the actual observation. Now the actual observations are very not so much in number. We have observations for only some number of years. So that by itself is not enough to train the model. But once the model has been trained, we can fine tune the model by bringing in the observations. And that way we could show, like with the help of various visualization approaches using things like empirical orthogonal functions and so on, that the what we get from the simulations and what we get from the actual observations. Now if you compare them to what we get from from our model before with fine tuning and without fine tuning, we see that without fine tuning it only learns to emulate the Earth system model, but with fine tuning it starts resembling the actual observation also. So that way we, from emulation, we can go closer to the reality also. So with that, I would end my talk, and I'm open to questions.
Thanks a lot. We give a big hand to him. And I don't see any question online. So we can go to the question from the audience here. Okay, so it was a really very nice talk. First, he summarized everything what happened in the last week, so that if you forget in last 2 days during your break, so he made you to remember what and note down. So, and second part of the talk where he has really give very nice overview for all the things what we are trying in the meteorology. So it's very nice. And now, I mean, we don't have much time. So yeah, yes, yeah.
You can pass the mic back to, you can just give it.
So in your last slides, you talked about the fine tuning. Like if you fine tune the models, it matches closely with the real world observations. Can you talk in more about what techniques you use for the fine tuning the models? And
So, like when we are doing the transfer learning, so like it is important to use something to avoid something known as catastrophic forgetting. So that means that like you train the model to do one particular task, and then you like update the model by fine tuning. What I mean by a neural network model has of course a millions of parameters. Now, when you trained it or calibrated it on the, let's say, the model simulations, you estimated all of those parameters. Now, when you are calibrating it on actual observations, now you cannot estimate all the parameters once all over again. So what you do is you just keep some of those parameters unchanged, and most of those parameters unchanged, and some of the parameters you try to calibrate so that the outcomes match with the observation. So like this has to be done in a controlled way, so that you don't the original the setting of the parameter is not too much disturbed, because if you do that, then you will forget what you had already learned to do. So like we use the particular regularization. What was it called, Deepan?
Weight consolidation.
Yeah, elastic weight consolidation. That was the name of the particular technique. But the basic idea is that like you choose only some of the parameters to optimize, holding the others constant.
Good morning, sir. Very engaging talk. Sir, I have a couple of questions. Like we talked about the causal relationship and how important they are. So like if multiple predictors like ENSO, IOD, snow cover, soil moisture and all like jointly affect ISMR, we know that. So can machine learning disentangle their causal contribution in a physically meaningful way? And if it can, how? And another question is like do causal relationships between ISMR and predictors remain stable during the extreme years? Like if we have a very strong El Nino, so can machine learning models adapt to such non-stationarities? Like
yeah, let's begin with the first part of the talk. So there is something known as structural causal models. So when you have a large number of variables and you try to represent the causal relations between them with the help of with a set of equations. So the main challenge in developing any kind of theory of causality involving multiple variables comes from what is known as confounders. Confounder basically means that like you think two variables are causally related, but because changing one is also changing the other, but actually it's more complicated than that, because if you change one, then maybe some other variable also gets changed, and what the change which you observed in your target variable is is not directly the impact of what you change, but the other impact of some various intermediate variables. So like because of the presence of confounders, any problem related to causality becomes very complicated. So structural causal models is a nice framework in which you can build the thing which you mentioned, that is bringing in the different aspects, the different contributors, and you can build it. But the challenge is when you are framing the different equations in the structural causal models, when you are framing it, we have to do a lots of statistical tests to make sure that we are eliminating the impacts of confounders. So if you it's a difficult task, but in principle it can be done. Sorry? Yes, it can be done, but it's a big challenge. The second which you mentioned is do these causal relations remain unchanged during the extreme events and so on? That is basically I interpret the question as the robustness of these causal events. I mean, can we say that these at one point of time the causal relations like this, and at a different time it changes for whatever reasons? Well, I don't have an answer to this right now. But that can be. I mean, there have been some studies not based on these theories of causality, but using some other more simpler statistical approaches, which show that let's say the relation between ENSO and ISMR is changing, and under various climate change scenarios, some relations between some known relations may break down and so on. So those are those, I mean, people have come to those conclusions based on those, like using other statistical models. Now, whether these can also be seen in a causal framework, that is, I don't know if some study has been done. It is theoretically possible to do it, but I'm not able to give a yes or no answer.
Okay, you can discuss more each here whole entire week. And we can take one quick question. Yes, give the mic.
So thank you for the talk. Generally, when we train machine learning, when we use machine learning for Indian monsoon or whatever other mechanisms, we rely on the availability of the data. So for regional places, we have a good amount of forecast. But places like Northeast, where data availability is less, what are the current techniques which you are using apart from reanalysis or remote sensing data to get the machine learning get the data for the machine learning in the first place?
I mean, data availability is is of course I mean, if you don't have data, then you cannot do too much. But in general, one approach that has greatly developed in recent times for data sparse regions is domain adaptation. That is, you train a model specifically for a data rich region and then adapt it to a data poor region or data sparse region. Again, just as I mentioned in the previous case, like you build a detailed model in a place where specifically for a domain where you have a lot of data, and then like you assume that larger, I mean, because the physics will, you can hope to be more or less constant everywhere, but the more fine-grained aspects may be different. So you once you have estimated the parameters, you hold most of those parameters unchanged, but some of those parameters you try to re-estimate using whatever data you have in a data sparse region. So the domain adaptation is the simple answer to the question.
Okay, good. Thanks once more to Dr. Adway.